and Technology at ITI, the leading global advocate and trade association for the tech industry. ITI has long been a leader on both cybersecurity and AI policy, and today's event will focus on the cybersecurity of AI models and systems, a critical area of importance for the tech sector. AI has created new cyber threat vectors that malicious actors can exploit, but AI also powers high-performance analytical tools that can strengthen existing cyber infrastructure. Just yesterday, ITI released our AI Security Policy Principles, a guide that provides recommendations to policymakers on how to improve the cybersecurity of AI systems and models. The guide outlines 5 key principles we recommend policymakers follow to most effectively address this important issue. First, leverage existing cybersecurity practices, standards, and controls where they are already sufficient to address the cybersecurity of AI. Second, coordinate with like-minded allies and partners to ensure that policy approaches to AI security are global and interoperable. Third, ensure that any AI security policy reflects a comprehensive approach across the AI lifecycle and value chain. Fourth, utilize public-private partnerships to achieve AI security outcomes. And fifth, ensure adequate support for foundational AI R&D and for training and growing the existence of the cybersecurity workforce. We'll dig into the details of these principles and their real-world application in 2 conversations today. First, my colleague Courtney Lang will lead 3 industry experts in a discussion highlighting our AI cybersecurity principles in practice. Then I'll have the honor of interviewing Rob Silvers, the Undersecretary for Policy at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, on critical infrastructure cybersecurity in the age of AI. With that, let's begin. I'll now hand it over to my colleague Courtney Lang, who will introduce our first panel.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for joining us. Panelists, if you could please turn on your cameras and join me, that would be great. Wonderful. Well, again, thank you for joining us, everybody online, and thanks to several of our representatives from ITI member companies for being here today. I am joined by Brendan Peter, who is the head of global engagement for Zscaler, Kristen Verderame, who is vice president of government affairs at NetApp, and Daniel Cruz, who is vice president of public policy and government affairs at Palo Alto Networks. So thank you all for joining us today. As John mentioned, we are really excited to talk a little bit more with you about some of our policy principles in practice and how you all are either integrating them into your existing cybersecurity processes, or alternatively, kind of what are some things that you're thinking about at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. So given we have a fairly short amount of time for this panel, I just want to dive in and ask you all to maybe share some high-level perspectives about why you think ITI's AI security policy principles are important and what the key thing perhaps that policymakers can take away from them are. Brendan, maybe I'll start with you, and then I'll kick it to Kristen and Daniel after that.
Sure, no, happy to, and thanks for having us, and congrats to ITI. They're incredibly important, and I think for all of us that are working around the globe, we're seeing so much activity in the AI policy space that I think the principles are going to be foundationally important as governments all look both to each other and look to industry to figure out the right path forward. So I think I just returned from Singapore International Cyber Week last week, where the theme obviously was focused on AI security. There are 40 national cyber attaches and folks from around the globe that are there, and everyone is focused there. We have different paces, I would say, of action. And so it's really, really critical from our perspective that we think about common objectives and common outcomes. And for us, that's one of the biggest reasons why I think what ITI has released is going to be able to add more value as the global conversation continues.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do work with governments around the world as well, Brandon, and I see that there's a lot of wondering what to do and how to start the conversation. As many of you who know me, I've not been shy about saying that there's a lot on AI, there's a lot on security, but there's not a lot that brings it together. In the IT Sector Coordinating Council, we've ran a number of efforts that tried to actually bring those two things together and put some meat on the bones of what is appropriate. And I think the ITI principles really nicely summarize a lot of the work that we have already done in that area and kind of put it in buckets that others can look at and really build upon. So I commend the ITI as well. I love the work you guys do. Of course, as you know, I'm a happy member. But I think these cybersecurity principles are going to be a great start and a great guide for governments around the world as well.
Yeah, building on what Kristen said about the AI cybersecurity nexus and ensuring that we actually put meat on the bones and mature understanding of that fusion right there. I feel like everyone on this call here has had a really exciting last 23, 24 months in the AI palooza, recognition that this is generationally changing technology and we to quote, do something about it, right? Harness the innovation, minimize the risk. The issue with saying we need to do something about AI, it's akin to saying we should really have smart policy about the economy. Like it's that impossibly large. And so the ability to actually effectuate those common goals, right? Harness the innovation, smartly minimize the risk requires chunk-sized pieces of specific use cases where we can actually enumerate policy that will achieve that. I think these principles advance that on an issue we all care about, the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. So Courtney, John, and team, congrats on it and look forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you all. I'm glad to hear that, hopefully these will provide a helpful foundation for policymakers around the world as they are thinking about, how best to approach some of the questions that are emerging around this. I think one of the things that, we raise in the policy principles and that John outlined at the outset was this recommendation around really taking a holistic approach to AI cybersecurity. And as a part of that, really making sure not only that cybersecurity approaches are kind of integrated across the ecosystem, but also across the AI value chain. And given you all sit in slightly different places, have slightly different business models, and are engaged in slightly different ways, I would love for you all to talk a little bit about your perspectives from kind of where you sit and some of the activities that you are undertaking in order to kind of facilitate this holistic approach. Brendan, maybe you could speak a little bit about zero trust. Kristen, I would love to hear more about secure by design. And then Daniel, if you could talk a little bit more about how Palo Alto is actually seeing benefits from AI in the cybersecurity solutions that you all are offering, I think that would be helpful. And maybe Daniel, I'll start with you this time since I started with Brendan last time.
All right, perfect. Well, the AI cybersecurity nexus, I think this is one place where certainly everyone here on the screen, Brendan, Chris, and others would agree. And it's not just because we work for companies that do this for a living. We talk about AI, we talk a lot about risk, right? That's sort of the contours of how we're having a lot of these conversations. Without a doubt, the risky thing for society, the risky outcome for society is not aggressively leveraging AI for cyber defense purposes, hard stop. And that's not hypothetical, that's not marketing speak. That's the reality of where our digital way of life stands today. The currency of the 21st century is data. These are the units that we need to protect for the confidentiality, the integrity, the availability of data. That's what keeps our personal information safe. That's what underpins the integrity of critical infrastructure operations and everything in between. So we need to secure data. Unfortunately, for too long, network analysts have been drowning, absolutely drowning in security data, oftentimes from 60 to 70 different feeds from different layers of their network. You've got the firewalls, you've got the network layer, you've got cloud security, you've got endpoint, you've got everything in between. And you have these really well-intentioned, overworked analysts sitting at the middle, trying to capture that all, play whack-a-mole, while critical vulnerabilities are missed and alerts go untriaged. That is not the way forward. If we want to stay ahead of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, that is not the answer. It never will be the answer. And we were at this inflection point where the security industry was sort of losing that. AI has flipped that paradigm on its head. And we're already seeing the results. This is not a hypothetical thing. It's not we need to squint our eyes and hope in a decade we'll have new whiz-bang tools. Today, that paradigm is being flipped on its head so we can stay ahead of those actors. And that is really exciting. That's what gets us up in the morning. So I'll give you some data points there. Not an advertisement for our company, I think for the collective here. We all have data and things we can throw out. But the point is it reinforces that today there is a way to flip that paradigm and stay ahead. We don't have to drown in security data. We can leverage it to keep ourselves safe. So testing this thesis, Palo Alto Networks, AI-powered SOC, wanted to test its own product to flip this paradigm. Every day we ingest 59 billion data points. That's triaged down to 26 alerts using AI, and then down to 75 alerts, ultimately one that requires human analysis in our SOC, 59 billion to one. Pretty compelling. Does it work for our customers? We saw average mean time to respond before AI-powered SOCs 2 to 3 days, now 14 hours to 2 minutes. So I'm speed talking here because I want to make sure that Brendan and Kristen get their similar advertisements in our limited time here. But this is, again, not an advertisement for Palo Alto Networks. This is the promise of the industry right now. This is not hypothetical. The rubber's hitting the road today. We can flip the paradigm. We can go from drowning in security data by leveraging AI. We can leverage security data to actually better fortify our network, stay ahead of those adversaries. That's something we can all get pretty excited about.
I love the passion, Daniel. I love it. It's awesome.
Over to you. That was, sorry, stop.
Get all
89
excited.
seconds. Yeah, over to you.
All us cyber nerds get all excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's fact. And I love your comment about data. For those of you who don't know NetApp, 30 years, all we've done is data storage, data management, intelligent data infrastructure. And we use AI internally in our systems for that intelligent piece of the data infrastructure. As you said, it's all about the data and protecting the data, whether you're using AI or whatever new technology tool that comes down the road. So we build it in to our products, our systems. We test it just like you do. If we can't secure our stuff, nobody's secure under AI. So that's kind of how we look at that. I think that secure by design flows into that pretty easily. If we design our stuff to be secure from the start, we're all in a better place. When the IT Sector Coordinating Council, and I chair the ITSEC, and for many of you folks participating today, I'm sure members of the ITSEC, as you know, we've done a lot of work with CISA on what is AI. We define it as more an AI system to capture the whole ecosystem. I know CISA has kind of defaulted to software look at the moment, but we're encouraging them to look more broadly. I think the principals do that. They speak to the models and how important that part of the ecosystem is. The companies that are in the ITSEC represent all pieces of that ecosystem. We're talking about the edge, we're talking about the data, we're talking about the models. There's a lot more to it than just OpenAI. And a lot of the lawmakers and policymakers around the world really just want to look to kind of those big AI players when they look to how to do things. So secure by design, as many of you know, framework that CISA put together several months ago. The ITSCC has helped them put some of the meat on the bones, as we talked about before. The pledge that many of us signed up to last spring really encourages companies to, in good faith, have a plan to try to get their stuff secure up front. Identify 7 specific goals, many of which will be talked about today, I'm sure, and are part of the principles as well. Basic ways to make sure that your data is secure. So happy to talk more about secure by design or answer questions for anyone about the process or how they can get involved. We're obviously big supporters of that and helping not just CISA, but also other governments around the world kind of sort through that.
Got it. And I guess I'll jump in too. So appreciate the comments both from Daniel and Kristen there. I think for us, given where we really focus is on zero trust network access as a company, and zero trust like AI has also become the most marketed word in the world, I would say, over the last few years. For us, the concept of zero trust network access really is about both continuous enforcement, continuous analysis of traffic, users, workloads, and applications. And all of that is relevant in the context both of AI and AI for cybersecurity. We process 500 billion transactions a day that run through our zero trust exchange. AI is foundational, both to us being able to automate more of the billions of policies that our users are enforcing every moment of every day to ensure that the latest insights are resulting in actionable enforcement actions from an organization to ensure that they're not putting themselves more specifically at risk. But I think also more importantly for us, both as a provider and for our customers that leverage technologies to provide better defenses, it's also really about, I think, being able to interface. I think Daniel made a good point here relative to the cacophony of tools and alerts that organizations are facing, a need to bring more of that together with an easier way to manage and see across those. So, whereas we focus on the zero trust network access side, certainly identity, EDR pieces are also critical components of what zero trust more broadly looks like. And for us, we have to have these fine-grained enforcement policies to deal with a wide range of threats, both associated with traditional cyber attack vectors, but also unique vectors associated with the deployment of AI inside enterprises. And so a lot of folks are focused really extensively on injection prompt challenges. And that's really where, from our perspective, fine-grained zero trust implementation ensures that folks inside organizations are continuously evaluated as they're moving across networks and applications to ensure that we're leveraging data as prominently as possible.
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, I think, it really is clear. And Kristen, I appreciated that you kind of made the distinction between models and systems and data, right? There are multiple different parts of an AI system writ large. And so, I think it's really important to keep in mind that, as you noted, it's not just about kind of the developers and the steps that they're taking to, of course, secure the models, but also about, right, the way in which deployers and downstream deployers are taking steps to institute, appropriate cybersecurity risk management practices. And so, building on that, another one of our principles looks specifically at, some of the existing cybersecurity frameworks, guidelines, standards that are out there. And we really encourage policymakers to look to those first, because in many instances, what we've understood and what we've found from working with our member companies is that a lot of the traditional ways in which we are approaching cybersecurity work. There are some unique risks that are emerging with the advent of AI, of course, but there is also quite a lot of traditional cybersecurity threats that remain, important to address, even with the introduction of AI as a new threat vector. And so it would be great if we could talk a little bit more about that. And Kristen, maybe I can start with you, but would you be able to just share a little bit more about, what perhaps existing frameworks are out there that are appropriate for organizations to be leveraging that already address some of the risks that we're concerned about in the context of AI? And then Brendan and Daniel, I'll let you jump in as well.
Sure. Well, I think there are many, and they're of different degrees of specificity, right? We've got the cybersecurity framework that was out for quite a while. It's been recently updated, so that's good. We've got the NIST AI risk framework. I think there are a number of documents out there that talk about best practices. CISA releases one every week, if not more, it seems, than my email box. So there's always more and more coming out. I think it's capturing things at a basic level so that small and medium-sized businesses can figure out where to go and what to do, and then larger companies sharing what they do at a more sophisticated level to help those smaller companies catch up. There's a different level of investment in the world. I think it always has tied to business plans, right? That's why financial services was kind of out in front on cybersecurity, because if they didn't secure it, they would entirely lose their business. That's kind of why it's front and center for what we do in terms of data. So I think it's matching up what's out there with the actual needs and vulnerabilities. What is the holy grail of each sector to determine what is the right thing to look at to protect as a guide? I think the Secure by Design, the 7 goals that we picked are pretty simple. They're pretty obvious and they're pretty basic, but if you do those 7 things well, if you make progress in those 7 things, in the conversation we had with CISA, we kind of agreed around the table, that's a pretty good start. That's a pretty good start. So I'll leave it there and let the rest of you guys chime in.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And I think certainly one of the things that we think it's important that both policymakers, regulators, and users keep in mind is, AI is like another software asset, and both the development, deployment, and operation of it can benefit from a lot of the good work that's already been done. I think, I was around in industry at the time when the framework was first contemplated at NIST. To see where we are 10 years on and updates from that, I think the benefits that we can see, both from an industry perspective and looking to implement common types of controls and best practices across a broad portfolio of solutions. Even though we're 100% SaaS delivery company and operational company, we have dozens of applications and services that we build, and standardizing the way that we're talking about implementing and looking at controls that are applicable up and down the technology stack wherever we're building it, wherever we're deploying it, is most certainly a common outcome that I think benefits all of us. And I think that's part of the reason, obviously, why those of us in industry continue working with ITI and others to try to also help evangelize. We, in a rush and a desire to kind of get engaged in AI policy, we have to be thinking more holistically than just an individual national self-interest. And massive amount of work in standards and certification frameworks and voluntary compliance regimes are there. We're not saying they're perfect for the world of AI, but great foundations that we can continue to use to help standardize and move forward.
I keep thinking back to something that Federal CIO Claire Martirana said at a Billington chat, that probably at least 95% of the participants here were around Billington in early September. And it was a discussion about federal procurement of AI. And she said, AI is software. The federal government knows how to acquire software. We know software. And that really stuck with me, because I think that sort of harkens to, obviously, AI may be a revolution when it comes to what it means for society and a lot of the implications. And we're seeing things now about diagnosing diseases. It's exciting, it's real, it's promising. But when it comes to the security of AI systems, perhaps it is more of a evolution, not a revolution, which can be a good thing. Building on the good work that has already been done and not having to start from scratch, in many cases, is a good thing. And Courtney, I think the ITI principles sort of hearken to that. They recognize that fact, that if at the end of the day, we're talking about data integrity, data security, AI is turbocharging all conversations of data. It's expanding the attack surface. It's increasing the velocity of how data is used and its processed and where it travels. Still a conversation about data at the end of the day. So it's software. We know how to do software. And so what can we build on that doesn't reinvent the wheel there? And Kristen and Brendan talked about some of the existing doctrine we can build on. Why don't I just add to the conversation in the spirit of applauding the great work of the US government, CISA and others, and our Five Eyes partners, is last April, CISA led a Five Eyes joint seal publication on deploying AI systems securely. It's a really helpful document. I'll throw the link in the chat for the folks who haven't seen it here. But the concepts it builds out there about deploying AI systems securely, having the governance structure around where you know what employees are using what apps and when and what data that's training on, sort of taking existing data security posture management principles, but now applying that as sort of a tweak that takes it to AI security posture management. We're not talking about a revolution. We're talking about an evolution. We have a lot of the tools. We have the concept. We have the muscle memory. That's a good news story. So I think that stuck with me, what she said there. We know how to, AI software. We know how to do software. So let's build on what works. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all really important and helpful points, because again, as we're saying, it is not a revolution, right? A lot of the existing practices can be used in order to secure systems. And I wonder if we could just focus on one additional point in that conversation, and that's around, so if there is a unique kind of risk identified and there is not existing guidance that is out there, what approach should policymakers be taking, should stakeholders be taking in order to address that or fill that gap? Because I think one of the things, that you referenced, Daniel, I think, is that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but certainly there might be an instance in which there is a need for kind of additional guidance, and would just be interested to hear your perspectives on kind of what that approach should look like if it turns out that there is a need for some additional standardization or work to be done there. Happy to start with anybody, but.
Well, I can start and say, I think the answer is really public-private partnership, right? The government comes out all the time with goals it wants to achieve. And a lot of times we share those goals, but how you get there is an entirely different conversation. And I think I give the CISA a lot of credit for the supply chain task force working with industry to come up with some really good ideas and thoughts around supply chain and SBOMs and all of that, making sure those are things industry can actually do. Same with Secure by Design, working with us on, okay, where are we trying to get to? How do we get there? And having us help them explain why we can't do certain things, why we can do certain things, what makes sense for everyone. And when you come to those joint conversations, those joint discussions, those joint decisions, it makes it a lot easier for industry to follow and actually implement. So everyone gets happy, all boats rise in that situation. So obviously I'm a fan of ITSCC and the public-private partnerships. I'm very active in it, but I really do think that's the key. If there's a gap, worked with industry and government together instead of jumping to regulation, talk to industry and say, how can we get where we want to go together?
Yeah, I think, one other thing I'd add to that is I think, and Daniel made this point, just in terms of the evolution of the technology. And as policymakers think about what the operating rules and conditions can and should be for secure deployment and utilization of AI technologies, one, we have to think about this in the long arc of evolution, right? We didn't get to where we are with AI today, despite it now being the only thing people want to talk about most of the time. It's an evolution of technology over the last 30 to 40 years, and we have to think about our policy frameworks in a similar construct, of ensuring that we're focused on issues and outcomes that really matter without disincentivizing broader work to ensure that from a defender standpoint in a cybersecurity domain, the overwhelming advantages certainly that we think AI brings on the defensive side don't get outweighed by early potential advances in the offensive attacker category here, while understanding that our deployment and maturation of models is going to continue to evolve.
Daniel, anything to add or?
Yeah, keeping the spirit of building upon what works. I mean, Kristen talked a lot about CISA's Secure by Design pledge and the great work of the ITSCC as sort of being an interface in a lot of the development there. What kind of building block can that be for the Secure by Design pledge as a foundation for living in the age of AI, which we all live in now? A lot of the concepts are the same. Perhaps there are some sort of new lenses or new tweaks we could build upon and look at things, skate where the puck is going there. One thing as a company we're looking a lot at is just how enterprises, how AI usage across enterprises is just like this snowball that takes off, and it's often a hard time to sort of put the governance controls around it so you know that it's happening responsibly. We've seen research that 55% of enterprises have employees using unsanctioned Gen AI apps. They're not doing it because they're trying to be non-compliant employees. They're curious individuals who are trying to tinker with things to improve processes. That's great. But what are those training on? Is it training on customer PI? Is it training on other sensitive data? So there is sort of a need of taking this kind of secure by design principles, this concept that we're not just bolting stuff on, but implicit to the way we leverage technology is a sense of security and trust. There's probably a way of taking that and then kind of reapplying it to the era of AI. So maybe that's secure by design 2.0. Maybe it's secure AI by design. I don't know what the bumper sticker is, but I think the good news is it can build on what we've already done and just recognize that there are kind of little tweaks, a new lens and a way of looking at things. But central to all that will be partnership. I know Courtney and John, we started working closely together at the launch of this ICT Scrim Task Force in 2019, which lives on. So I think that's testament to these partnership structures. Sometimes if you build them, they will come. It's about creating the table for people to be at. So with that, enjoyed the conversation this morning.
Yeah. Daniel, don't give CISA any more ideas. We got enough secure by design work right now. But having said that, we are doing.
And now the Scrim Task Force is also working on
edit that out of the recording that gets posted.
That's right.
Activities. Maybe just one question to wrap up for all of you. I know we talked, quite a lot about what's happening in the US, but Brendan, you had mentioned at the beginning, you were just out at Singapore International Cyber Week, where a big theme was AI security. And I know all of you have kind of referenced that there are different governments that are thinking about, how best to approach AI security, whether they're issuing public consultations or putting out guidelines. And just as a kind of moment to wrap up, would be interested to hear your perspectives around, how can the United States best work with international partners to advance AI security? And what are some kind of things that we should keep in mind? I know we've just talked about public-private partnerships as one really critical area to this, but, would just appreciate your perspectives on this last kind of, how do we work best with international partners on AI security? Brendan, maybe I'll start with you since you just got back from an international trip.
I mean, well, look, I mean, it's continued engagement is just absolutely vital here. We know every national government, regional governments, global alliances and organizations are all looking at different impacts. And it's important that the USG continue to share what we're learning and what we're doing. I mean, obviously, NIST is an incredible asset and a perfect example, I think, of what Kristen and Daniel have both mentioned in the context of public-private consultation to drive standards that actually get used and uptake in industry and in government. So certainly really, really critical there. I mean, it's almost impossible to keep track. I know ITI is doing this for a lot of us in terms of the range of consultations, legislative vehicles. We've seen early movers that have focused on AI in different geographies. And for me, I think honestly, it's really about continued engagement, continued collaboration, and continued leveraging of existing partnerships and models that have worked previously and can work as we're looking at shared outcomes.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the NSC actually approached us earlier this week about the Quad principles, the Quad cybersecurity principles that they're trying to roll out, and really have the U.S. kind of set the standard for what's happening in other Quad countries. And certainly talking to the folks in the Quad countries and folks in Europe, they're on board with the larger principles. I think it's more of us experts who maybe are a little further down the road having conversations. So each time I go to another foreign country, which I do all the time now, it's meeting with those people and saying, here's what we're doing in the States, and here's the public-private partnership model, here's how it works, and here's where we can share some of our experiences. So any of us in the tech community that are having conversations with other governments, please share, please talk about what we're doing here. The model, I think, is the most important thing to share. I really do think that public-private partnership gets them where they want to go, as opposed to just regulating without talking to industry. So that's probably where I focus a lot of my time, is the model and the process that we follow more than anything. But I think the NSC is really rolling out a new effort through the Quad, which I think will be a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniel, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I'll just close with it. It is certainly less impressive than Brendan's 22-hour flight to Singapore last week, but I was in Ottawa last week. Just a hop, skip, and a jump.
A little cooler, so
yeah, it was delightful up there. But one of the things we were talking about at the cyber event up there is it is actually rare today to see some sort of authoritative alert or guidance that doesn't have CISA, FBI, NSA, and 4 other countries' flags on it. Like, It is rare not to see that. That was not the case a decade ago, and I think that's an awesome evolution. And a testament to the public-private partnership is not just happening within U.S. government circles. It certainly is, but now that has really expanded to a global community, and I think that bodes well for a lot of the collective imperatives we have over the next decade or so here.
Wonderful. Well, I think that the Undersecretary has just joined us. So I want to thank all of you for being here with us today and sharing your perspectives. Also very much appreciate your engagement in the development of these policy principles. And we look forward to continuing to work with you all to advance AI security. And with that, I will close out the panel. John, I'm going to turn it back over to you to have a chat with the Undersecretary. So thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thanks, Courtney. And yes, indeed, I do see Undersecretary Rob Silvers has joined us. Let me just take a moment to briefly introduce our distinguished guest. Robert Silvers was confirmed by the Senate as the Undersecretary for Policy at the Department of Homeland Security on August 5th, 2021. He is responsible for driving DHS's direction across all of its missions, including counterterrorism, cybersecurity, AI safety, border security, international affairs, a range of law enforcement activities, and trade and economic security. Rob also serves as the chair of the U.S. Cyber Safety Review Board and oversees the federal government's Supply Chain Resilience Center. Thank you so much for joining us today, Undersecretary Silvers. You've been a great partner to ITI and industry over the years, and we have appreciated your collaboration on a number of initiatives. We know that DHS has been undertaking a lot of work at the intersection of AI and security, including completing deliverables pursuant to the AI executive order, and we're certainly happy to be able to host you today to talk more about these important issues in light of the release of ITI's AI security policy principles. So just to start with a level set, can we get your perspective on how DHS is thinking about cybersecurity in the age of AI? Are there new threats that DHS is tracking that have emerged alongside the rise of AI? I'm not hearing you, unfortunately. Hold on a second. Let's see. Geez. Okay, hopefully everyone can bear with us for a second. We do seem to be having some type of technical difficulty. Hello?
John, this
Yes. Okay. We
Zoom,
are set.
Zoom
Thank
played
you.
a trick on my default configurations. I apologize for that. I want to start, John, by saying that the feeling is mutual. ITI has been just an outstanding partner to the Department of Homeland Security for many, many years across administrations, and it's a credit to the organization. I'm very pleased to be here with you today to congratulate you on the release of the AI security principles. To your question about sort of the nexus between AI and cybersecurity, AI is going to amplify the capability of everyone involved in cybersecurity, as it's going to amplify the capability of people across industries and fields. And when we talk about cyber, it's going to amplify the ability of attackers to automate attacks, to scale out attacks, to do more convincing phishing and spear phishing attempts, to do more convincing online fraud, and other more to identify vulnerabilities in systems on a scaled out and automated, real-time basis. It is also, and already is, going to empower network defenders. And that is something we are really excited about. Even before generative AI, the generative AI boom and the advent of ChatGPT, a number of cybersecurity providers were using artificial intelligence to build strong security products. And what we're going to see is a little bit of an arms race between attackers and defenders in cyber generally, which has been going on for decades now, and in the use of AI. I will say that in the wild, with the state of play, with what we see now, we see network defenders using artificial intelligence every single day to fortify their network defense. They're using it to identify vulnerabilities, to scan code, to identify anomalies in huge amounts of network traffic that ought to be investigated further because they may be indicators of a compromise. And AI has been used successfully to head off a number of attacks in that respect. The attackers, we certainly see everyone from the Russias and Chinas to cyber criminals experimenting with AI. We have not really seen mass exotic campaigns that are actually developed by AI used to great effect or catastrophic effect to this point. In fact, when we see OpenAI and Microsoft put out a joint report about a year ago, maybe, that noted that some of these nation state adversaries were using artificial intelligence, Gen AI products to, in the way that any of us would use a Gen AI product, just to kind of make their life a little easier and to create efficiencies in what they already were doing, as opposed to reinventing their entire manner of doing business. So right now, I would say the defenders are really using it to the greater advantage in the wild, but that could change, and I think you're going to see success on both sides of the ledger.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's, it's a really important point, right? I mean, sometimes it seems like there's maybe too much focus on, AI risks and things, but, I think as you're pointing out, I mean, it's a really important tool on the defensive side of the ledger as well. Certainly one of DHS's core responsibilities has always been associated with protecting critical infrastructure. And DHS was tasked with implementing several different sections of the AI executive order from last year, including a section calling on CISA to release a set of, or DHS and CISA to release a set of AI-focused guidelines for owners and operators of critical infrastructure to enhance the cybersecurity of AI systems. CISA undertook a risk assessment to help inform the development of those guidelines, working with the the ITSCC and other partners. With the previous session was just chatting a little bit about the importance of the partnership. Can you share more about any unique risks that were identified for critical infrastructure owners and operators, and how the guidance helps address those risks?
We broadly bucket AI-related risks 3 ways. The first is attacks that use AI to launch the attacks. And that's what I was just speaking of, where threat actors might use it to automate, to scale out very effective attacks. The second risk bucket is attacks on AI systems. So those are the kinds of attacks where you might have trying to manipulate training data or an algorithm to actually launch a cyber attack or some other kind of attack on a system that is operating from AI technology. And the third bucket of risks actually doesn't necessarily involve any malicious actor at all. And it's the risk of AI system failure because of a design flaw, or it simply makes an automated decision that leads to an outcome that is bad for safety or security. And that is something that we are increasingly attuned to as AI technology is deployed out into critical infrastructure. So if you think about how AI technology is going to be embedded in the core technology that operates the electric grid or hospital systems, financial exchanges, air traffic control, you name the sensitive application, you want to make sure that there are guardrails in place to protect against catastrophic failure. Not because anyone's trying to manipulate the system or cause a bad outcome, but because it happens nevertheless. I want to say, and so we've developed guidelines, as you say, operational guidelines from CISA that were released in April to address all 3 of those risk categories, and the full life cycle suite of safeguards and quality controls and safety and security controls that companies can put in place to mitigate against that. Everything from pre-deployment testing and auditing on the back end to check that the outcomes are the ones that you would expect. And the like, and then building cybersecurity controls around AI systems and everything like that. I do want to be clear, we're not coming at this from a doom and gloom perspective or trying to call into question the deployment of this technology. AI is going to do so many miraculous things, and we are firmly convinced it's going to be for the good of humanity and our country, and we want to encourage it. And in fact, as a department, we are deploying AI across so many of our missions. I mean, we're using it to find fentanyl as in shipments coming across the border. We're using it to improve the screening experience at TSA so that people have a better experience at the airport, and so on. So we are avid adopters here. It's all about building an architecture of security around the technology so that people trust it and so that people aren't harmed by it. And we think we can do that. We can deploy it and keep our edge as a country, as the hub, the global hub of AI innovation, while also building guardrails. And it's CISA's guidelines and the rest of the work that DHS and the broader Biden-Harris administration are doing in this space is all about getting those guardrails in place.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, that's you raised a really important point. I mean, we talk a lot about AI safety and AI security. I mean, in the context of critical infrastructure, I think you're raising the point about resiliency and just keeping those systems up and running too, which is just really so critical. In terms of next steps for that guidance, as I understand it, it's not static guidance. It's going to be a living document. You're going to continue to update it. I think yearly to make sure that you're staying on top of all that. Can you say anything more about what the department is doing to kind of promote the guidance and help ensure its implementation across critical infrastructure owners and operators to make sure that those risks are mitigated?
it's definitely version 1.0.
Yeah.
This thing is going to iterate. It has to, and we have to come into it with that humble, active learning approach because we don't have all the answers, and this technology is not yet as deployed now as it's going to be next year, and 5 years from now it'll be even further ingrained in everything that we're doing. And so as we learn the lessons and see what's working and what's not, we're going to have to uh, develop and evolve these guidelines in particular, but everything else too, everything else too, and we can't do that alone as a government. We have to do that together with industry partners, the research community, the academic community, the civil society community that is thinking about important things like privacy and civil liberties, uh, and come to common approaches that work for everyone. So we're definitely gonna iterate on this. In terms of your question, how are we getting the word out? How are we encouraging adoption? What we're doing is we are meeting day in and day out with industry partners across this country to introduce them to the guidelines, to ask for their feedback, to see how it's going as they work to adopt them into their own operations and their own safety and security and compliance programs. And we're learning and we're encouraging them to do the work. And we've seen a positive developments not only in terms of the guidelines we've produced, but the voluntary commitments that the White House has put on with the frontier model developers. And there's so many participants in the ecosystem. There's the model developers. There's the enterprise end users that are actually taking the models and then putting them to work at the application level. There's consumers that are impacted by all this. There's state and local governments that have a stake in how this all plays out, and so we're bringing them all together to figure out what makes sense and to lead.
That's great. The AI executive order, I think, kept a lot of federal agencies busy. Certainly DHS, right near the top of the list. Another tasking from that EO was for DHS to set up an AI safety and security board. And we understand that the board has been hard at work preparing a report, which is expected to be released shortly. Can you share a little bit more about this work, including how DHS views its engagement with the private sector, through that board or otherwise, and how you see it complementing some of this other work that we've been talking about that DHS is undertaking to advance AI cybersecurity?
To get this right, we have to work shoulder to shoulder with industry. It can't be the old model of we hear from industry, but then we go back behind the curtain and kind of do our own thing and you see what comes out the other end. It's not enough. We don't understand AI well enough to do this alone. And so what we have done is we have formed an AI safety and security board here at the department. It's chaired personally by our secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, and it includes members that is really a who's who of the space from all different parts of the space. You have CEOs of companies like Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on the model developer end. You have leading critical infrastructure companies and their CEOs represented as the enterprise end users of the technology. We have state governors, major metropolitan mayors, and leading civil rights and civil liberties and privacy experts, all participating and working on a framework of roles and responsibilities for making sure we do this in a way that's safe and secure for the American people, while leveraging all the benefits, while getting all those great, amazing benefits. And so that the board has indeed been hard at work under Secretary Mayorkas's leadership, and I expect you'll see more from that space soon.
Yeah, I mean, really looking forward to seeing that, and maybe Sticking with the topic of boards, you also chair a prominent board, the Cyber Safety Review Board, which has already released a series of impactful reports. Can you share any more about any of the key outcomes of those reports? I mean, during the prior panel, and I'm not sure how much of that you caught, but one of the points that was made was that AI is predominantly software, right? And there's a lot of software, security issues that have featured prominently in those CSRB reports. I'm wondering specifically if there are any takeaways that are kind of relevant to this discussion in the AI security space.
Sure. So the Cyber Safety Review Board was launched in 2022, and it's housed here at DHS. Proud to serve as the chair. And like the AIS, it is a little bit different of a model than the AI Safety and Security Board, but there are some common features to include that it's truly public-private. You have all the key federal leads for cybersecurity. In addition to my service on the board, we have the head of cyber at the FBI, the head of the cyber division at the NSA, and so on, the head of the cyber division at CISA. And on the private sector side, we have luminaries, true luminaries, who serve on the board as well. And it's 50-50, public-private. And what we do is when there's a major incident, we come in, we find out what happened. We talk to all the relevant companies, the victims. We collect information, and then we draw up the lessons learned and publish a report of what we found, what happened in the incident, and what can everybody take away so that this doesn't happen again. How can we improve? How can companies do it better? How can the government do it better? What can Congress do to help? And so on. And we have done 3 reviews so far. They've all been extremely well received. And while none of them have directly taken on artificial intelligence security issues, I do think there are some commonalities in that a recurring theme in the Cyber Safety Review Board's recommendations is the need to really be thoughtful about building in security at the design stage, whether it's from software, in developing software, or in cloud architectures or otherwise, because it's just too hard to play catch up after a product has already shipped and try to bolt security on. To that end, I really appreciate the partnership of ITI. Your organization has been quite vocal in the importance of security by design when it comes to cybersecurity, and has been a big supporter of CISA's efforts to push software developers to be secure by design. And I think there are takeaways that are relevant in the field of AI.
Yeah, thank you for those kind words. I know we only have a few minutes left, but I know you do a lot of work internationally, and it's part of your remit, and ITI certainly does a lot of work on these issues internationally. And we have already seen multiple jurisdictions outside of the U.S. also, issuing guidelines specific to AI security. I was actually in Singapore last week for, Singapore International Cyber Week. A major focus of the event of the week really was AI security. And Singapore unveiled their AI security guidelines and companion document last week. I wonder if you could say a little bit about how DHS is engaging with international partners, to ensure that approaches to AI security are interoperable globally.
We're doing it every day. It's really, really important. None of this is happening in the artificial borders of any one nation. This technology is being developed across the world. It's being deployed across the world. And we need to be leading as a country in working to set the standards that are picked up globally when it comes to AI safety and security, and in the realm of AI even more broadly than that. And for that reason, we have been leading in forums like the G7, the OECD. We have direct engagements with the European Union competent authorities, DG Connect, and so on, to make sure that when we do work, we're sharing it with them and encouraging them to leverage the work that we've done. And likewise, we're learning lessons from those like-minded countries too. It's also really important that the United States keep its lead in AI. The country, let's be honest, there's a lot of competition between the United States and China for who's going to lead in this space. And there are going to be massive economic, business, cultural, national security benefits to whichever country grabs that lead and can keep it. And right now we are in the lead, but it's it's a fragile lead. We talked to experts. One expert estimated for me recently, yeah, we're in the lead by about 4 months over where China is in developing the most advanced level model. I mean, 4 months. So we have to maintain the edge. We have to be very careful that well-intentioned steps that we take not inadvertently squelch innovation, given how precarious that lead is and how critical it is to keep that lead. And so we're all in to keep the United States as a country at the forefront, and to do it in partnership with like-minded countries. Likewise, companies that are operating transnationally, we can't afford to fall into where we were with privacy, and sort of still are with privacy, of 100+ different frameworks. We really should have as much harmonization as we possibly can. It's just not workable any other way for how multinational companies operate. And we are fortunate that we are at we're in the earlier innings of governments taking on AI regulation and governance. And we need to make sure that we take a harmonized approach, and that the US is leading together with partners in that.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, certainly your referencing of the need for harmonization is certainly, I think, music to the ears of ITI and our companies, and appreciate your work there. I know we're almost out of time. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that we're in an election year. Election security, a major priority for DHS and CISA, really an evergreen priority. But I just wonder if you have any any thoughts on the approach to securing the election, but and really specifically whether AI is already playing a role at all in those efforts.
We're all in to safeguard the security of our election infrastructure in this country, and we're working really closely with the thousands of counties and state level authorities that actually do the critical and noble work of administering our democratic elections in this country. It's everything. And we are working with them on their cybersecurity. And indeed, the states and the counties have made really significant strides in since the 2016 election, when these issues really came to the fore of the national consciousness, in terms of securing voter registration databases and so on. We work very closely with the secretaries of state in the states across the country, and what is really a nonpartisan effort to just make sure that the stuff that keeps our democracy operating is safe and secure. We're also very focused on the physical security of election workers. We've seen a really concerning uptick in threats made against people who are volunteering sometimes to run our country's elections, and we're working really closely with the election worker community and state and local law enforcement to help protect those public servants.
Yeah. Well, appreciate all the work that you and the department are doing on that score as well. I see we're at time. I want to be respectful, certainly, of your time and the audience's attention. So I want to thank you, Undersecretary Rob Silvers, for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing your valuable time and insights with you. And it's always a pleasure, Rob, whenever we get to chat. So thank you.
It sure is, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks. This concludes our event for today. So I certainly want to thank the audience as well. For everyone else online, be sure to follow ITI on X at ITI_tech tweets and find us on LinkedIn to stay connected. I also encourage you to take the time to visit our website at itic.org to learn more about our AI cybersecurity and cybersecurity advocacy. I think my colleague dropped the link to our principles that we released yesterday in the chat as well. But if not, you could find those